You're going to love this next segment. Well, let me say that with caution. You're going to see the future, I believe, in this next segment, but you're going to, it's a fascinating conversation. Jim Rickards is the author of this book, New York Times best-selling Death of Money. He's an expert on the current financial climate, and he's just written an article that has just come out that talks about what 2024 is going to look like. And I think we see the same kind of things in 2024. If we don't change our ways, we're in deep, deep, deep trouble. And it could happen at any time. Do you believe that?
I think that's exactly right, Glenn. It could happen at any time. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, but the way I explained it, the science is really the same. I call it the snowflake and the avalanche. So it's snowing, the snow's building up and building up. So an expert mountaineer can look at that and say, look, that's very unstable. It's on a ridge line, it's windswept, it's exposed to the sun a certain way. It's going to collapse, and if it collapses, it could kill the village
and you don't
below.
know when it is, and
Correct.
It most likely would be a bird landing on it or a sound or something, and you don't know.
Or a snowflake. So a snowflake comes along, it disturbs a few, that disturbs a few more, you get a slide, you get a chute, the whole thing comes loose and it buries the village below. Now, who do you blame? Do you blame the snowflake or do you blame the unstable snowpack? And I say, if it wasn't one snowflake, it would have been the other, the one before, the one after. You don't blame the snowflake. You blame the instability of the snow. And you go out to Aspen, go skiing, what do they do in the morning? They get up at 6 o'clock and they throw dynamite down to descale it. That's a safety tactic. What are we doing in our banking system? The way to do it would be to break up these big banks. You know, when I started in banking, J.P. Morgan was 5 different banks. It was Chase, Chemical, J.P. Morgan, Manny, and there's one other in there, right? So break it back up into 5 banks. We're letting the snow pile up. And then what are we waiting for? We're going to get the catastrophic collapse. So there are things we can do. We're not helpless, but the regulators and the people...
Nobody will even admit it.
That's right.
Nobody will even say, I mean, man, so many things, I'm a self-educated guy. So I don't have any, I just have common sense. I look at something differently than all the people who have all the education in the world have been trained to look at it. I look at it as a giant snowpack.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not going to stand. That won't. And they tell me the same thing every time. We have systems. We have systems. We have systems. Yes, but at some point, because the economy is just like seasons, the Kondrackian wave, it must go into winter and spring and summer and fall, and you just keep trying to build it up, it's only going to make that crash much worse. Nobody will ever admit that.
Well, I've had the privilege of, I've met Regional Reserve Bank presidents, members of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. I know people on the staff.
Do they admit it in private?
Privately,
with people like
privately, yes. Privately, behind closed doors, a small dinner. I've had members of the Board of Governors say to me point blank, we have no idea what we're doing. We try this. If it works, we do a little more. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. It's a big science experiment. They will admit that to you privately. They can't say it publicly. I don't blame them. I mean, they would cause a panic. But they understand it. They're not uneducated. They're miseducated. In other words, they have PhDs, but if you have a PhD in a false science, I mean, another example, for 1,500 years, from the 1st century to the 16th century, the smartest people in the world believed that the sun revolved around the earth. And it's not like they were dumb in the 13th century. We had Dante, right? There were smart people around, but they believed, they said, well, it's obvious. You wake up, the sun comes up over there, it goes down over there, you go to sleep, and it's over there again. So clearly it's revolving around the earth. They did all the equations, they did all the math. Well, they started to notice at some point, you know, Jupiter, it's not quite where we thought it was. It's over there a little bit. When you get data that contradicts your theory, you're supposed to question the theory. Instead, what they did is, oh, you know this big circle? Well, there are little circles on the big circles, and the big one goes counterclockwise, and the little ones go clockwise, and they called them epicycles. Well, the math got more and more complicated. Eventually, Copernicus came along and said, you know, maybe the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. Maybe the earth revolves around the sun. And then Kepler came along and said, with better observations, he said, maybe the orbits aren't circular, they're elliptical, and Brahe did the math. And they said, lo and behold, the whole thing works. That's called a paradigm shift, right? Now, we are in a world where the smartest people, and they are smart. I mean, you put Janet Yellen and me down an IQ test, she'll get twice, she's twice as smart. Larry Summers is 3 times as smart, so they're not dumb. But they've got the wrong paradigm. They have what they call these equilibrium models. You know, the clock winds down, you wind it up, and it goes again. The world is a complex system, and one of the things about complex systems, if you make it bigger, when it collapses, It doesn't collapse with like 3 times the force. It collapses with 1,000 times the force. In other words, it's exponentially greater. And that's the problem. They've got the wrong model.
I want to talk to you in the brief time that we have. I want to talk to you a little bit about then what does it look like? Because people don't have, you know, my kids even ask me, Dad, what does it look? What do you mean by that?
Right.
And I said, I don't even really know. Just unlike anything the world has ever seen.
Correct.
At least unlike anything we've ever witnessed in America. It is devastation. And we survive. We're at the other end of it, but
right.
It's ugly. Can you tell us? Let me take a quick break, and then when we come back, will you tell us what does it mean to you, a guy who's actually lived this and studied it? What does it look like when it crashes?
Okay.
Back in a minute. Okay. So what does it look like in 2024? Now, this is just arbitrary date. Could happen tomorrow. Could happen in 2044.
Right. Well, before we go forward, let's go back just a little bit. In 1998, the world was hours away from every market being closed. That was the collapse of long-term capital management, the hedge fund. I was there. I had a front row seat. I negotiated that bailout, and that's no exaggeration. We were hours away from shutting down every market in the world. Wall Street bailed out the hedge fund. In 2008, it was Wall Street that was collapsing, and the central banks bailed out Wall Street. Again, we were hours or days away from a much larger collapse. So let's go forward to 2018.
Okay, so hang on just a second. That goes back to the Kondracki wave. If we wouldn't have had these bailouts,
we'd be in much better shape.
We'd be in much better shape today.
Correct.
Because they would have reset,
right,
gotten stronger.
So in 98, Wall Street bailed out a hedge fund. In 2008, the central banks bailed out Wall Street. In 2018, it's going to be the central banks that are in distress. There's a limit to how much money they can print. Not a legal limit, but a confidence limit.
Right.
People will just lose confidence. So who's going to bail out? There's only one clean balance sheet left in the world. There's only one thing bigger than the central banks. That's the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is really the central bank of the world. You know, why is the Federal Reserve not called the central bank of the United States? Because Americans hate central banks, so they gave it a funny name. The IMF is the central bank of the world, but they called it the International Monetary Fund. Funny name. They have a clean balance sheet. They're only leveraged 3 to 1. The Fed is leveraged 80 to 1. They have world money. It's called the special drawing right, or the SDR. So they can print that. So they'll print $4 or $5 trillion of SDRs, hand them out, and all of a sudden, a broke country like Hungary or maybe the United States will have reserves, and they can buy our tractors and get the whole game going again. But here's the problem.
God.
But where's the limit to that? There's the problem. There are different rules. The IMF has different governments. China's going to have a bigger voice. Now, I don't think we're going to get there. This is the elite plan. When I say elite, I mean
I know.
This is their plan. I don't think we're going to get there. I think we will have a spontaneous, this snowflake avalanche, we'll have a spontaneous collapse in the meantime. The solution there is going to be to lock down the system. They're not going to be able to print their way out of it. So they're going to freeze the bank accounts. They'll reprogram the ATMs. You'll get $300 a day for gas and groceries.
It's basically Greece, what's happening in Greece.
Well, correct. We're Cyprus before that.
Cyprus.
Yeah. Why do you need more than $300 a day for gas and groceries? They'll say you don't. Your money market fund, people think today they can call the broker, sell the units, it'll be cash in their bank account by tomorrow. They think it's a one-day way to the money market fund. They're going to lock it down. And this is not something I'm making up. The SEC came out with rules last summer. They said that, okay? So you go around the system. Money market funds locked down. Banks locked down. Deposits above deposit insurance. You're an unsecured creditor. But lock down the whole system. Shut the New York Stock Exchange. You think that can't happen? The New York Stock Exchange was closed for 5 months in 1914. From July to December 1914, the New York Stock Exchange was closed. At the beginning of World War I, there was a run on the banks, and everybody wanted their gold back. All these things have happened, Glenn. They will happen again. So when you get to the point where you can't print your way out, and we're at that point, you just lock the system down, and then you say, hey, we're not taking your money. We'll get back to you. We're just kind of locking it down for now. This could lead to riots, what I call the money riots. And I lived in Baltimore for 5 years. I drove a taxi there. I love Baltimore. It's sad to see what's going on. But these have whatever causes they may have. But these will be a different kind. These will be money riots. You know, they say that the most traumatic things you can go through are death, divorce, and losing money. And losing money is right up there. So all of a sudden, in communities, they'll want to burn down banks. They'll be banging on the doors of brokerage. Well, of course, the police are heavily militarized. That's one response. This lockdown I talked about, that's another response. You know, every toll booth in America, I have Easy Pass, right? We love our Easy Pass or whatever it is. Well, they're digital scanners. They can scan your face. They can scan your license plate. They know where you are at all times. The digital recognition software is there. None of this is fantasy. I mean, it's all here now.
You're talking like this, and quite honestly, if I didn't know who you were, you're a conspiracy theorist. But you're not. You're a banking guy. I'm a
lawyer. I'm an economist.
Right. You know what is happening, and you're just playing it out as it has been played out before.
Correct, and that's history is one of the. I use complexity theory, I use physics, I use inverse. I use a lot of scientific theory, but history is one of the most powerful things. And as I mentioned, just go back and look at the times the stock exchange had been closed. Now, the IMF, I say they're transparently non-transparent. And what I mean by that, you can go to the IMF website and find this stuff. I didn't make it up. I didn't break it into a safe or anything. It's all there. But try reading it. I'm enough of a geek that I actually do understand it. I've been trained in it, but it'll make your head hurt. And they use jargon, and they'll use words like spillover when they mean contagion, etc.
Will you do me a favor, because I'm about out of time? Can you stay over, and we want to talk to you on the radio show?
Sure.
And have you go into specifically on tomorrow's radio program, specifically what you can do to be able to prepare for it. And is there a way out? Can we as a country still get out of that? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Good,
Yep.
Good. All right, that'll be on tomorrow's radio program. Back in just a minute.